Welcome back to Jeeping for Beginners. Today's topic is going to be off-road communication. Not everywhere you go is your cell phone going to work. So the hot topic is whether or not you should be using a CB radio or GMRS. Today, we're going to answer that question for you, so stick around. I think you're going to enjoy this. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Once again, my name is Josh. This is Jeeping for Beginners, and the hot topic debate that we are talking about today is off-road communication. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you have figured out or know, our cell phones pretty much only work inside and around the metropolitan areas of this country. When you get up into the mountains or out into the woods or deep into the desert, your cell phone is pretty much useless. So how do you communicate with either the rest of your group or with emergency services should you need to? So that leads us to the hot topic debate of whether or not we should be using a CB radio or GMRS radio. There's a big difference between these radios, guys, and a big difference in their reliability and so on and so forth. Now, we're not going to get deep into brands. We're not going to get deep into opinions and so on and so forth. That's not the goal. The goal is to explain the differences in the radio so that you can pick out the ones that works best for you. Now, before we get too deep into it, I just want to give a shout out and thank you to everybody who has supported the channel. We are inches away from 1,000 subscribers. If you are new to the channel, please don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button. It's 100% free. That bell notification will let you know when the new videos come out. And if you like the video, go ahead and like the video. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first radio we're going to talk about is going to be your CB, also known as Citizens Band. Now, this particular radio setup has been around for decades, most commonly used with truckers and off-roaders. In fact, I did an internet search and found out that in 2021, the majority of the sales of CB radio are actually going to Jeepers or off-roaders. Not as commonly used anymore as far as general communication, so the bands stay relatively open and the channels stay relatively free. The CB radio you can have in either a handheld version like I have here, or you can have in a hard mounted version inside of your vehicle like this. Either way, both radios are going to accomplish the same thing. Now, the frequency of a CB radio is actually very limited, but because it's limited, it's very focused, okay? The frequency runs, and not to get technical on you guys, but from 26.965 megahertz up to 27.405 megahertz. So there's about a half a megahertz difference between channel 1 and channel 40 on your average CB radios. The advantage of it being so specific is that when you hook up the antenna to it, either on the handheld unit or on your vehicle, the antenna is tuned specifically to that frequency band, so there isn't as much static and as much feedback. Now, the disadvantage to a CB radio, because it is older technology and still runs off of analog signals, is your range. The range of a CB is anywhere from about a mile to about 3 miles, maybe a little bit more. A lot of it depends upon line of sight, meaning that you got to make sure that you can see the person that you're talking to, or at least the radio can see the person that you're talking to. It also depends upon weather conditions, solar flares, so on and so forth. This frequency range is very low, but it is also easily disturbed by natural phenomena. Now, most CB radios can be purchased online at pretty much any off-road store, Amazon, Walmart.com, eBay, pretty much anywhere that you can think of, you can buy a CB radio, and prices aren't that unreasonable. They'll range anywhere from $50 to $150 depending upon the unit or the setup that you prefer to have in your vehicle. CB radio is also 100% free for the user. It does not require a license. It doesn't require any annual fees of any kind. You can simply plug it in and begin to use it. The majority of your off-road community is going to have a CB radio of some sort. Although a lot of us are switching over to GMRS, and we are going to talk about that here in just a couple of minutes. Or as far as an off-road form of communication, it is relatively reliable. The reason being is, again, because the frequency band is so short and the traffic is very minimal. You can pretty much pick the channel that you want to use and be able to talk to the other parties in your group with ease. And let's face it, that's ultimately what you need the off-road communication for. All right, so now let's talk about your ham radio setups. Now, these guys can seem very daunting right off the bat to a lot of brand new users. Why? Because there is a lot more buttons, there's a lot more features, there is licensing that's required for these, but there are some advantages to running the frequency bands here. Like I had mentioned with the CB radio, your frequency is only about a half a megahertz difference between channel 1 and channel 40. With your ham radio or FRS radio setup, you have a frequency range anywhere from 1.3 megahertz all the way up to 1,240 megahertz. Now, are you going to use the whole bandwidth? Absolutely not. But the nice thing about having that bandwidth and your AM and FM frequencies also mixed in there is for emergency services. Should you end up in a situation where you need to get a hold of somebody, you have a much broader range of frequencies that you can broadcast at in hopes to reach another person and or emergency services. Now, GMRS radio is probably the most common frequency band used in the off-road community. Now, this ranges anywhere from the 460 to the 468 megahertz range, somewhere in that area, and your channels can be narrowed down to very finite. So there's hundreds of channels that are in between those two frequency ranges. GMRS does require a license, however. Do not let this scare you, as licensing for GMRS radio is super simple, super easy to get. Regulated by the FCC, it's only about $35, and the license lasts you for about 10 years. Using ham or GMRS radio, your range can be anywhere from your 2 to 3 miles, depending upon line of sight, all the way up to 30 to 40 miles with direct line of sight.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, buddy, you're coming in crystal clear.
Other nice thing is the repeaters. Okay, the repeaters are usually tall towers that are amplified and powered, sitting on most of the mountain peaks throughout this country, where you can connect to with your radio and then once again amplify and broadcast your signal for a much broader range. To kind of give you an example, we were up in Moab, Utah. We were sitting at the northern entrance to Canyonlands National Park, and it was traffic from hell, and so we were stuck there waiting for everybody to get through their ticketing. Me and my buddy were playing with the radios, and we had picked up a frequency where somebody had hopped on the GMRS repeater from all the way down in St. George, Utah. Now, if you look at a map and you see the difference in length from that, that is a huge area to cover. Not something that can be done with a CB radio. In the off-road community, using GMRS is extremely reliable. The frequency is very pointed and narrow when it comes off your antenna. You can be picked up, again, a mile or two away, crystal clear over the radio. Now, your GMRS radios are available in handheld, like this one here, or they are available just like your CB as a hard mount inside the vehicle. The units mounted inside the vehicles tend to have a much higher power output. Most of your handheld radios are going to put out anywhere from 5 to 8 watts, which does limit its range because that's about all the power that this little guy can put out. This one, I think the maximum we've been able to do is about 3.5 miles before it actually starts breaking up. Simply, again, because of the amount of power. Now, your units that you would mount inside the vehicle can range anywhere from 25 watts all the way up to 50 watts, and you can get amplified antennas in order to broadcast further than that. So let's talk about the cost. Now, again, a lot of people get scared of your high-end radios because they think, ooh, high-end is going to cost a lot more money. But truthfully, this radio right here, I picked this up on the internet with a battery, charger, an earpiece, and a separate microphone, all as one kit for $23. This is a Bofang radio, and for 23 bucks, I am definitely not disappointed. In fact, we actually carry multiple of these with us so that those that are traveling in a group off-road that don't have any radio communications, we have radios in order to hand out. Now, the ones that you mount inside your vehicle, those I have seen range anywhere from $100 up to $1,000. Now, it really depends upon the features that you want on the radio. You just want to make sure that the reviews are good, and that the radio is going to put out and broadcast the way that you want it to broadcast. So which one is better? Is CB better than ham, or is ham better than CB? I am not going to sit here and preach or tell you that one is better than the other, especially since I actually use both in my Jeep depending upon the situation that I am in. But what I can say is that with your ham radio option, you do have the ability to contact emergency services, to listen to weather bands. You do have the ability for a much longer range, connecting to repeaters, and the cost variance between them is really not that much different. I have been using CBs in my Jeep since 1996. And I have been very familiar with them. I really enjoy them and I like them, and I find them to be very dependable. It wasn't until recently that a buddy talked me into trying GMRS and playing with it. I could definitely see that there's some advantages there. And my collection for GMRS radios is growing slowly as time goes on. So for the last year and a half or so, I have been using more of the GMRS frequencies than I have been on the CB radio frequencies. Disadvantages. So in your handheld versions of these radios, CB or GMRS, I have actually found that the batteries in a CB radio will last for days on end, easily days on end. For whatever reason, it just doesn't pull as much power, probably because it's not broadcasting nearly as far. However, on my Bofang radio, under normal use on an off-road day, I get about 6 hours out of this battery before it dies and it has to be recharged. So, advantage, disadvantage. Now, when it comes to the base units that are mounted in the vehicle, the other disadvantage to ham over CB is the way that the antenna mounts. It requires a much larger hole, a completely different mounting surface, and it has to be a 100% weather-tight connection in order for it to be dependable and reliable. So final thought is, should you go with a handheld version or should you go with a hard mounted version? This is a hard question to answer because it really depends upon what you're doing. If you are doing a lot of hiking, handheld definitely makes a lot more sense. If you spend most of your time in your Jeep, then the hard mounted makes sense. To be honest, I actually carry both. And the reason that I carry both is for situations like spotting. I have a unit inside my Jeep that I can broadcast and receive, and my spotter will also have a handheld radio so that no matter how far away from the vehicle he is, I can hear him clearly on the directions that he's given.
All right, a little to the driver, a little to the driver.
So I put it to you, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the CB radio or do you prefer GMRS? Why don't you put that down in the comments down below so that I know which one you guys are using and which one that you prefer. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the efforts. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification so that you can be notified of our future videos. Until then, happy Jeeping, stay safe, and we will see you next time.